Hey, what's up? My name is Nero from BadassMidi.com. Today, I'm excited to introduce you to BMC 2.0, the latest version of the Badass MIDI controller library for Tinsy. BMC 2 brings a ton of new features, including an onboard editor, which allows you to have a built-in editor using an ILI 9341 or an ILI 9488. And you can use this with touch. So you can have an editor. You don't have to connect to the editor app anymore if you don't want to. Obviously, the editor app is a lot more powerful and has a ton more features, and it's a lot easier to use. But if you find yourself at a gig where you want to change the behavior of a button or an encoder, you can do that now at a gig without the need of a laptop or any other device to control your BMC build. So in this video, I'm going to give you a quick overview of BMC. For this video, I have a device I call BMC Logic. It's basically a controller for Logic Pro. I use it for recording, for tracking anything. It has everything I need. It has an ILI 9488, a 4-inch display. And let me start by showing you what the user interface looks like. So the first thing you do once you go to the editor, select your ports for your Tinsy and hit connect. So the first thing you'll notice is that the interface has changed. You can now customize the look of your buttons, your LEDs, relays, encoders, everything. As you can see here, I have some buttons. These have custom graphics. I selected them specifically to match the actual device I have. You can see here the two side by side. Pretty much I think I got it as close as I could as far as the look of the entire interface. You can see here this is an encoder, and I used a custom jog wheel so that it matches my actual interface. These are actually buttons and LEDs merged together. In BMC, you can merge your hardware. For example, a button and an LED can be merged as one. BMC, the firmware itself, will see them as two completely independent devices, but they will be shown to you on the editor app as a single unit to match what your hardware looks like. In addition to merging, BMC 2 now gives you linking, and linking hardware basically works by connecting their events together. As you can see here, when I hover on one of these three, all three highlight. That's because these three devices are linked. So if I put an event on this button, that event will be applied to the LED and the encoder. If I apply it to the encoder, if I make changes to my encoder or to the LED, that change will be applied to all three of them. Now, this can be turned on or off right on the editor, so you don't have to use it. You can enable or disable the linking, but the linking is created when you use the config file maker and you make your layout. Another big change in BMC 2 is an event library. BMC 2 now uses an event library, and in that library you create all your events. Your events are the actions or the status that's used by BMC. So for example, if you have a MIDI control change, that's an event. You create it, you set the channel, the control number, the value, the ports, and all that, and you create your event in the library. Your library is just a list of all these events. Then what you do is you assign each event to your devices. You can assign an event to all three of these. You can assign an event to only one of these, and adding an event library allowed to bring in an onboard editor. It simplified a lot of the code, since in the past every device had its own events and every device had its own type of events that needed code for both the editor communication and for the actual execution of those events. So with this event library, that simplified a lot of the code, shrunk a lot of the code, which gave me some room to add code for an onboard editor. In addition to that, you can share events between multiple devices, and that's where linking comes into place. You can use the same event on all these three devices, and they will all have their own behavior based on the type of device. For example, an encoder is going to handle the event differently than a button. An event like a program change on a button will just send that value or toggle the value or increment, decrement the value if you specify that. However, if you apply that event to the encoder will just increment and decrement that event. So it'll say the value from 0 to 127 when you rotate it clockwise, or from 0 down back to 127 and down all the way to 0 again if you rotate it counterclockwise. An LED, on the other hand, only displays an on-off, so it'll display the value that you tell it to display. An LED will turn on when the value is at 127 and turn off when the value is down to 0, or anything other than 127, or you can set it so that it turns on when the value is 25 and any other value will turn it off. BMC keeps track of all the incoming and outgoing control change messages and program change messages, so you don't have to worry about anything other than tell it what value the LED needs to turn on or off when it's sent out. This is also used for increment and decrement, or as it's called in BMC, scrolling. So I'm going to show you real quick what the editor looks like. To edit any of these, you just double click them. The first thing you'll see here is your events list. You can scroll through it. You'll see here I have some events that don't have anything assigned, and I can add things to them, or these are events that I already created. If you click up here, you'll see a list of all your buttons. You'll see whether if they have a name assigned to them, they'll appear here. That's another addition in BMC. Names are now also part of a library. That means you create a list of names to label all your devices and to label events, presets, set lists, songs, layers, anything. You create this event and you assign them here. You can select any name from the list and assign it across all or multiple devices, or all the devices, if you want, can have the same name assigned to them. So for this, you see here I have an event already assigned. It's my scrub event. All you have to do if you want to remove it is drag it back to the list, or you can click the trash icon. So let's see if I can find it again. Here's my scrub event. All I do is drag and drop it. You select your trigger on buttons. If I want to remove it from the event, from the button, I just click the trash icon. If I want to edit it, I just hit the edit and I can go in and edit the event. If you have linking enabled, linking is enabled here. So this button is obviously linked to an LED and an encoder. So when I hit save, all three of them will receive the same event. So if I take this event out and I hit save, now my LED has no event. Now if I go to the LED and assign it this event, the LED will send that same event to everything else. Here's the button and here's the encoder. In addition, you can automatically assign the name of the event. So here you can see the name of the event. This is the name that was assigned to this event from the name library. If you edit the event, you can see it here. You can assign a name that you can make it so that this event name is automatically assigned to the device. And you do that by enabling this checkbox. This is your enable linking. This is your auto assign names. You can click on this question marks to get a little more info. This button lets you save when you click enter, when you press enter on your keyboard. And this button closes the editor when you hit save. So if I don't want to close the editor window, it'll stay. If I turn this on, it'll close the window. This is useful if you're editing multiple things at a time and you don't want to keep the window open the whole time. To edit all your events, you can head over to edit and events. Here's your list of all your events. You can search through them, filter them by different categories. you can come in and select the type of your event that you want. You add a name, and then this information down here is dependent on the event type. Every event type has its own different set of fields that contain all the data for the event. So for example, if I go here and I create a program change, we'll see things that are relevant to it: your channel, your control number, value. In many events, you'll see either value B. For example, in program change, you'll see program, and program B here. And this, if it says scroll max or toggle, what that means is that if you want to scroll by enabling scrolling, this becomes whichever one of these two that's lower in value will become the minimum, and the other one the maximum value for scrolling. So you can increment and decrement within that range. If you don't set value B or program B, then the range is based on the maximum values, which maximum and the minimum, which would be 0 to 127. So if I want to create an event that when I press a button, I want to increment the control change value from 0 to 127, I can, on control 0, I can leave it like this. I can also change the control number to 3. I can set it so that it just goes from 0 to 127, and I can enable scrolling. Here you tell it what direction you want it to go. That way you can create one event for scrolling up and increment, or one event to scroll down or decrement. And you can assign one to one button and the other event to the other button. You can also enable wrap or disable it, and with wrap, once you reach the maximum, then it'll go back to the minimum as you increment up, and it'll continue incrementing and just return to the minimum and go up. The same thing when you scroll down. Here you can select your ports. In this case, I just have a USB on this device. If you, a quick notice, if you assign, let's say that you leave it like this, what this is gonna do is this is gonna send a value 0 if you assign this to a button, every time you press the button, you'll just send value 0, which it's kind of useless, but in some cases it might be useful, because you might need it just as a way to shut off an effect on your processor and whatnot. Now I can set it to 127, and I can toggle it by just setting a value here as well. So if scroll is enabled, this becomes the minimum and this becomes the maximum. However, if scroll is disabled, then when you press a button, if this event is assigned to a button, when you press the button, it'll send value 127 if it's not already value 127, and then it'll send value 0, and it'll just send alternating values every time you press the button. So you can use this to turn effects on and off. And as I mentioned, BMC keeps track of all your control change messages and all your program change messages, so BMC knows what the last one that was sent out or received is. So you can use this to control an effect on your guitar processor, keyboard, synthesizer, whatever it is that you want done. Another tip here is if you assign this event to an LED, the LED will use value as its on state. So if you send control change value 127 on control 3 and you assign this to an LED, when the button sends that message out, the LED will turn on 127. If I wanted to turn on a different value, I can go in and say 90. So in this case, when you press the button, it'll alternate from value 90 and value 0. And when you set on an LED, the LED will turn on when you're on value 90. You can reuse this event on multiple devices, or you can create different events, one for the LED. So if, for example, you assign this to go and do an increment, for example, from value 1 to value 10, I can add this to a button. Okay, and I can assign it as scrolling. So now this button will light up, will send value 1 through value 10. Every time you press it, it'll increment the value. And once it reaches 10, it'll go back to 0. That's what these settings would do. Then what I can do is create a new event or multiple events for different LEDs where I can disable scrolling and wrapping, and then I can set one LED to use an event that has a value 1. That means that LED is going to turn on every time you have sent value 1 out or received value 1 on this control number. Then I can set another LED for value 2. That LED will only turn on when value 2 is sent out. With this, you can have LEDs that light up based on the control change value that was sent out. Another feature here is you have your clipboard. You can copy an entire event and then paste it onto another. Well, in this case, we're in the events editor, so it'll copy the event and you can paste it into another slot. You can use an empty slot for that. You also have Midi tool built in. Midi tool is just a Midi monitor, and it also can send Midi messages out. And with this, you can monitor incoming and outgoing Midi messages that are sent to your Tinsy and received by the app. Another feature, as I mentioned, is the names library. In your names library, you just head over and create all your names that you're going to be using for your build. And then you can assign them later just by going into your device and selecting the name. Or if you have auto assign names on, you just assign the names to the event, and whenever you assign this event to a device, it'll automatically give it the name. Another difference in BMC2 is the layers are pages in BMC1 are now called layers. So right here we're on layer 1. I have all these things set up on layer 1, but if I go to layer 2, now none of these have anything. So why? Because I haven't assigned anything to them. Each layer gives you a completely new set of buttons and encoders and everything, and you can assign events to all of them. The layout remains exactly the same, but you have a new set of data that you can assign to all these devices. In BMC, you have layer devices, so you can have a button. These are all layer devices, and these buttons, for example, change depending on the layer. You can assign a completely new data or things. Or also you have global buttons, global LEDs, global hardware, which doesn't matter what layer you're in, they just keep the same event. For example, in BMC, relays are global. They're always global, so that means that no matter what layer I'm in, the relay will have the same function across BMC. So you can be on layer 1, the relay will have the same event. Layer 2, it'll always have the same exact event. You can use this on buttons, encoders, and all that as well. For example, you can have an encoder that's set up to scroll through your different layers, and since it's going to be a single purpose hardware, it's just that encoder is just going to handle switching layers, you can make that one global. Another way to add events in BMC is by clicking the little star here, and you'll have this list will show you all your current events that you have set up. So all you have to do is drag and drop your event here, and now this device has the event assigned to it. Since we have linking, this, if you go to the actual button and you save, now everything will take in the same event. When you use this list to drag and drop your events, linking is not enabled. So you can think of it as you have to drag and drop into each one of your different devices. This is by design because this lets you choose if you want to add it only for this button, and if you want to add it to all three, by highlighting them, you know exactly which ones are linked together, so you can drag and drop them into the devices. This is another little feature here of BMC2. These are shortcuts. You can customize this to connect to different apps. For example, here I have my event set up, and I can go in and change what I wanted to open. So let's go take a look at the LFO real quick. The LFO sends MIDI control change in a waveform. So you can use this to control, let's say, a modulation pedal, or you can actually use it to control a reverb sound, and have it add a modulation to your mix, to your time parameter in that reverb. You can use it on a delay pedal to control the time and just create weird effects. There's a lot of uses for this. There's some info on the BMC documentation page. So this is just a quick overview of BMC2. I hope you like it. It's been a lot of work to make all these changes. There's a ton of information on my website. I'll leave a link below for all the BMC2 documentation. You can install, there's installation instructions, and you can download BMC and install it in Arduino directly from the library manager in Arduino. You will need Teensy in order to use BMC, since it's only compatible with Teensy boards. Now, a big thing to mention is that BMC2 is not compatible with previous versions of BMC. You will need a brand new config file. If you've used BMC before, you'll need to create a new config file just for BMC2, and that same config file will be compatible with future versions as well. I just couldn't add a migration tool. It's just the changes are so big in BMC2 that it made no sense for me to put a ton of time of doing a migration tool. The same thing goes for data. You can import a backup from previous versions of BMC into BMC2. A lot of this is because of this new event library. So this makes BMC a lot more powerful, but again, it broke compatibility with previous versions of BMC. So anyways, enjoy, and I'll have some more videos up, so check back later for more.